We are covering one of the most important topics for the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner exam, the shared responsibility model. At its core, the model is simple. AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud, while you, the customer, are responsible for security in the cloud. AWS handles the physical security of its data centers, the hardware, the networking infrastructure, and the virtualization layer. Think of everything from the concrete building to the hypervisor. That's on AWS. Your responsibility begins with what you place in the cloud, such as your data, applications, and identity and access management configurations. How this model applies depends heavily on the service you're using, and the exam will test you on these differences. Let's start with Infrastructure as a Service, or IaaS, using Amazon EC2 as the classic example. For EC2, AWS secures the physical server and the virtualization layer it runs on. However, you are responsible for everything above that, including patching the guest operating system, managing your applications, and, critically, configuring network controls like security groups and network ACLs. A common exam trap is a scenario where an EC2 instance is compromised due to an unpatched operating system. The question will ask who is at fault, and the answer is always the customer. Now let's consider Platform as a Service, or PaaS, like Amazon RDS. Here, AWS takes on more responsibility. They manage the underlying instance, the operating system, and patching of the database engine. This is a key distinction from EC2. However, you are still responsible for what matters most, your data. This includes configuring encryption for the data at rest and managing who can access the database through network settings and user permissions. The exam might try to trick you by asking who patches the RDS database software. That's an AWS responsibility. Finally, with Software as a Service, or SaaS, such as Amazon S3, AWS manages nearly the entire stack. They operate the infrastructure, the operating system, and the platform. Your responsibility is narrowed down to two key areas: your data and the access to it. For S3, this means you are responsible for classifying your data, deciding if you should use encryption, and configuring bucket policies and IAM policies to control access. The exam frequently tests this by asking who is responsible for enabling server-side encryption on an S3 bucket. While AWS provides the tool, you, the customer, are responsible for using it. A simple way to remember this is the phrase, "If you can configure it, you are responsible for securing it." This mental shortcut helps clarify the dividing line. If AWS gives you a setting to control, like an IAM policy or a security group rule, it's your job to configure it correctly and securely. The exam will present various scenarios, but they all boil down to this fundamental principle. Whether it's patching an EC2 instance, managing database users in RDS, or setting permissions on an S3 bucket, if it's a configurable element within your control, its security is your responsibility. For free practice questions, AI-powered explanations, and more exam prep tools, visit openexamprep.com. That's openexamprep, all one word, .com.